In this video, Representative Jamie Raskin discusses a legal case involving an individual shot by an ICE officer, Rene Good, and draws parallels to the Ashley Babbitt case, emphasizing the legal principles of self-defense and reasonable force.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. And I intervene here only because I want to respond to my friend from North Carolina, who I think starts with the incontrovertible point that it's wrong to prejudge whether this was murder. Then it is equally wrong to prejudge that it's self-defense. And I hope that that my colleague, with his astute prosecutorial understanding, would just as much reprove the Attorney General and the President for going out and claiming this was self-defense without a complete investigation, especially when all the evidence of our senses would suggest, if we're going to jump to a conclusion, we should jump to a conclusion that this was murder and not self-defense. But that's why we have the law.
Exactly. I mean, Kristi Noem, she already called it domestic terrorism, quote unquote. Unbelievable.
That's why we have a legal process. Now, the gentleman correctly states the situation, except he aborts the analysis midway. He says, well, she was told to stop, she was told not to go anywhere, but still she drove her car away. And I certainly saw that. The Supreme Court has a decision just on this point, which I'm sure the gentleman knows. It was decided in 1985. Everybody in criminal procedure learns it. Tennessee versus Garner, 1985, because Tennessee had a statute which said if there is someone fleeing the police, they can be shot. And the Supreme Court said that's not the rule. They can only be shot if they're fleeing the police if the police have probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or danger to other people.
Exactly.
Now, Ms. Good, who's a 37-year-old mom of a 6-year-old boy, now orphaned by ICE, posed no threat to anybody. At least, as far as we can tell, there's no suggestion that she posed a reasonable threat to anybody. That's the legal question. Now, I think our committee should launch an investigation into this. This would be a worthwhile subject for us to get into at this point. But the idea that simply because she disobeyed an order that she can be shot in the face at point blank is wrong. That's not the law in the United States of America. And you know who knows that? Everybody on this side of the aisle who talks about Ashley Babbitt.
So basically, he is just schooling the Republicans who talk about law, who talk about what the ICE agents are trained to do and how they reacted to the situation. He's pretty much, James Raskin is pretty much schooling all of these people here.
Because everybody talking about Ashley Babbitt seems to think that, well, she was told repeatedly to turn around and to leave, and then she still tried to use violence to get into our chamber, into the speaker's lobby, in order to get at us. And she was shot and repelled. And there were two different investigations which found that that was reasonable force used by the police because she was coming at them. But what we had in this case was this woman was trying to leave. She was trying to get away from it. She wasn't coming at the police. She was trying to get away from the police. So to the extent that we want to engage in an immediate post-mortem analysis, and I agree with the gentleman that this is why we have law. This is why we have a real legal investigation, and it is completely irresponsible for the president and the attorney general to be out there claiming against all evidence that this was self-defense. This is why we have law. Okay, then we should wait until we can make a final pronouncement upon that. But let's at least get down what the law is. This is the House Judiciary Committee. And people cannot be shot in the face simply because they walk away from a police officer. And especially when we've got police officers who are masked. And I just want to finish on this point, and I'm happy to yield to my friend. Because look,
even the question is, are these ICE agents, are these federal agents? How do you even know they're wearing masks all the time? And second of all, how can you shoot at someone who is just running away, while she weaponized her vehicle. Well, this narrative doesn't hold. It just failed miserably right from second one.
All of us represent jurisdictions. We've got local police, we've got county police, we've got state police. None of them are masked. We've got the Army, we've got the Navy, we've got the Marines. None of them are masked. We've got the National Guard. None of them are masked. Why is ICE masked? This is what we want to know. Nobody's given us a good answer for this. Now, one suggestion comes from the fact that we have multiple January 6 defendants who are working at the Department of Justice itself, including Ed Martin and Jared Wise. So if they're hiring them at the Department of Justice, presumably they're hiring them at the Homeland Security and ICE, and maybe they don't want them to be identified.
Exactly.
Because, of course, those people were very well video documented on the day of January 6th. There's a lot of suspicion that that's why these people are being masked, and they're not even telling us.
Well, these people, these ICE agents, they will be prosecuted. They fear for their life because once Trump is gone, once ICE is gone, what do you think will happen to these agents who are killing people? They will be facing the court of law. That's why they're masking. That is another explanation to it.
They're being masked. But it's precisely this episode which demonstrates why people are afraid of ICE and will try to move away from ICE rather than submit to their order, even when people need to submit to a lawful order of the police. Happy to yield to the gentleman.
Well, and just in terms
Absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. Now, I just want to recap everything. Raskin, he questions why ICE officers are masked. Unlike other law and enforcement agencies, that he mentioned, National Guard, Army, police, he suggests it might be to conceal the identities of January 6th defendants reportedly working within ICE or the Department of Justice, such as Ed Martin and Jared Wise. That is the moment. That's where he nailed it. He argues that this lack of transparency fosters fear and distrust, leading individuals to flee rather than comply with orders. I mean, I would most likely run away from them if I see them. Another representative then questions the relevance of the officer's perspective and the angle from which they viewed the incident, suggesting that the officer might have perceived a threat differently. Now, Raskin, he acknowledges the relevance of this consideration, but points out that the administration's claims contradict observable evidence. And we have all seen the video, guys. Subscribe and like this video. See you in the next one.